How do we know that the previous books were tampered with? Is what the Qur'an says sufficient as evidence?
Let's state it without any discrimination. A fair-minded believer, when truly looks at the Qur'an, finds its statements on this point to be sufficient for them. This is because the Qur'an controls the previous revelations with its characteristic of being Muhammed and Musaddiq. Muhammed distinguishes between right and wrong. Musaddiq confirms the existing truths. But as the question suggests, for example, I am someone who does not believe in the Qur'an, so why should I accept something that they claim has been tampered with? So the question is actually an important question. If he believes in the Qur'an or has no other evaluation at this point, there is no problem. The Qur'an explains in dozens of verses how the Torah, the Gospel, the Psalms were tampered with. But if a person does not believe in the Qur'an and wants other proofs, what proofs can be put forward? Actually, it is a very different and broad issue. It needs to be evaluated in many different dimensions. Let us answer briefly. Believe me, my beautiful brothers and sisters, my brother who has the question, and our brothers and sisters who are curious about this issue, they can already see the information about the falsification of revelations other than the Qur'an when they look at 5 things. What are those 5 things? He can see this from scientific data and historical information. They can see it from the contradictions in the Torah and the Bible. We are talking about 2 of them now. For the 2 books, the Torah and the Bible, let's call them the Bible together, he can understand that the Bible is falsified from what it says about God. He can also see that the Bible has been falsified through its claims about the prophets. So maybe other things can be added, but on the basis of these 5 things, the evidence that the revelations before the Qur'an were falsified can be revealed. If we are not going to take the Qur'an's evidence into consideration, if we are not going to say what the Qur'an says in this sense at all, he can understand the issue when we look at these 5 areas. For example, if we only look at the creation chapter of the Torah from the scientific data, it will be seen that many things it says in the creation chapter are contrary to scientific studies, scientific evidence, and scientific studies today. For example, in Genesis, it is said that life first existed as plants on land, and then living creatures appeared in the seas. But today's scientific studies say that this is not the case. It says that the earth was created before light, stars, birds and whales, reptiles and insects, flowering plants, and any animal. But again, the scientific studies, the things that have been put forward in this sense, in the scientific sense, the evidences say that this is not the case. Therefore, many other things reveal that those books themselves have been tampered with. As you know, when we say verse, we do not only mean the verses in the Qur'an. There is a section called Ayati Tekvin. That is, there are verses that exist in the universe. Those verses should never conflict or contradict the verses that Allah sends as revelation. There are very serious evidences in the Qur'an at this point, but since the previous revelations were interfered with by human pen, we see that there are many contradictions in them, especially at the point of creation. From historical information, for example, we can deduce that they are historical. For example, there are claims that Hazrat Adam was created about 6,000 years ago and in 6 days. In other words, we do not have anything that can prove this today in the historical sense. Hazrat Noah is said to have built a ship 450 feet long. There are some cities related to Hazrat Abraham. For example, when you look at the Bible in a historical sense, the information that those cities were built in later times and many other things should unfortunately be understood as evidence that they have been falsified in this sense. Here, unfortunately, I was going to express it for the following reason. Some of the information conveyed by the Bible, especially by the people of the book, has been passed on to our sources as Israeliyat. In other words, There are no such things in the authentic hadiths, but there are many things in the historical books that are transmitted from Israeliyat in this sense. It is useful to be cautious in this regard. The third area is the contradictions in the Torah and the Bible. When the same event is narrated in both the Torah and the Bible, it is immediately seen that there are very serious contradictions within the same book. For example, in Matthew's Gospel, it is claimed that Joseph, the husband of Mary, was the son of Jacob, while in Luke's Gospel it is recorded that Joseph was Helen's son, not Jacob's. Of course, we never accept any of this. Matthew lists the servants as 3, while Luke lists the servants as 12. In Mark's Gospel, it is called the Gospel of Jesus Christ in one place and the Gospel of God in another. In the Gospel of Luke, in one place it is said that God is my Savior, and in another place it is said that Jesus is the Savior. When you come to the Torah, you see the same contradictions and differences there too. For example, in one place it is said that Solomon's chariots had 40,000 stables and 12,000 horsemen, while in another place it is said that he had 4,000 stables and 12,000 horsemen for horses and chariots. In other words, the same issue is presented with different figures. Therefore, it is possible to see such contradictions in the book, that is, in the Holy Book. Now, when you come to the last two, if you have mercy, there is no need to look for anything else. You see what they say about Allah. There is no word of Allah here. There is something else. Because anyone who has understood a little about Tawheed knows that what is attributed to Allah in those books can never be accepted and evaluates them accordingly. For example, attributing a son to Allah, stating that Allah is a consuming fire, as it is said in the Taqweem chapter. Attributing fatigue to Allah, can fatigue be attributed to Allah, the Lord of the worlds? The mere existence of statements such as Allah wrestled with the prophet Jacob and lost to him, and many more, which are unworthy of the Lord of the worlds, is enough to show that those books have been destroyed. The same is what they say about the prophet in the fifth area. You already know that what they say about them is much more strange. For example, in the book of Genesis, it is said that Adam became like one of us in knowing good and evil, that Adam did not actually have the attribute of Ismat, that Noah's daughters who drank alcohol committed adultery with their father Noah, and that their own daughter became pregnant by the prophet, again in the book of Genesis. Again, many similar allegations are made for other prophets. For example, it is said that he was drunkenly raped by his grandson Canaan. So these are things that are already read in the existing books. It is stated there that Abraham gave away our mother Sarah to Pharaoh with his own hands, which is what is said about him in this sense. Again, Jacob is portrayed as someone who rebelled against God and rebuked him. For example, Aaron, according to the Torah, was the one who made the golden calf idol and ordered its worship. How many things are said about David? That he committed adultery with the wife of a commander named Uriah, that he had an illegitimate child with her, and so on, that he conspired against him, that he went to war and got him killed, that Solomon's wives were deceived by the pagans and came forward as idol worshippers, and so on and so on. So someone who reads even these things would say, this cannot be the word of Allah. This is the word of a human being, the pen of a human being. Therefore, if one does not only look at the Qur'an, but also evaluates it even in these 5 areas, one will see how the Holy Book is described. May Allah not separate us from the truth, and may He grant us all to comprehend the truths of the Qur'an, which is His word.